Okay, this is a rendering of a bison or buffalo that I did last week, and the reference that I used was off the internet. It was a live picture of a live buffalo, and I'm showing it to you so you can see the depth of shading that you'll be able to do if you practice, get good at it, have an understanding of the techniques. And we're going to apply these same techniques to a simple exercise we'll do, and that exercise is going to be done with eggshells, and we'll just take our time. And so get your sketchbooks, your sketch diaries out, or just a piece of paper. It's always nice to have your sketch diary, because when you're learning how to do these techniques, then you can date it. See how I've dated my picture down in the corner, in the right corner? And you can go back later on after you've been doing this for a while and see how you've improved. And that's always nice to be able to do. Plus, I can go back 30 plus years and look at some of my drawings. Actually, even longer than that. I have some drawings from when I was 14 years old, and it's really fun to go back and look and see where I was and then know where I'm at now. And heck, in 10 years, I'll look back on these and see what I did, and hopefully I'll be even better in 10 years. So I say put it in a sketchbook. That way you can put it away and bring it out later. So we are just really going to zoom this out and look at the eggshells and then get started. And what is that? There's a third eggshell in there with a frown. You know, I have to say that must be Mr. Brian. That would be my husband. I think he's feeling left out. So shout out to Mr. Brian. Don't worry, you're not left out. You're in here too. You get to peek in every now and then. So just stay out of my photo box, would you? Okay, we'll get started here in just a minute. These are all the supplies that you'll need to draw each time we get together. And obviously there's eggshell here, so that means you need to go have a good breakfast, crack open an egg, save the shell, rinse it out, dry it ever so gently, and then you'll have your object to draw. And then we have our kneaded eraser, very inexpensive to purchase on Amazon. I think I probably have 4 small ones that I have put together on this, molded and played with. As you know, this is a lot of fun outside of drawing because it's like Play-Doh, but it doesn't stick to you, so it's kind of a fun thing. And then I have my pencils here. I have the 6H, HB, B, 2B, and 6B, just so we can try them all out, because they all have different weights of color to them, the 6H being the hardest lead, so that's going to give you your lightest line, and all the way up to the 6B, which is the softest, and it's going to be a heavier, darker line because more graphite's going to come off of that pencil. So we have our pencils. Over here we have our 0-point eraser, our mono zero rectangular shape, and then I have a larger, sturdy eraser. I prefer using this type of an eraser to one of the little brick erasers or little pink eraser, because I have more control of this, and I have an edge. There's a little edge right there that I can use to get into areas more efficiently. If I need to erase a whole page, of course I'll go to one of those big erasers, but for this project and this little sketchbook, that one will suffice. And this is golden. I've discovered this recently to use for shading, and I mean, honestly, it's a little bit big, but if you can find a scrubber, this is called a scrubber brush, this will really help with your shading, because if you use a tortillon, it can cause some muddiness, but the brush just gently brushes your graphite into the area you want. And quite frankly, if you could find one half the size of this, maybe about, I'd say, yeah, about half the size, it's going to be easier to work with, but we're going to work with this in the meantime. and just figure it out. And then lastly, I have my brush for getting rid of any eraser so that I'm not putting my oily fingertips on my nice clean paper. So we have our tools now, and we will get started here drawing the eggshell. So go get your eggshell, eat your breakfast so you have lots of energy, and we will begin. Okay, we are going to begin drawing this eggshell that's turned upside down. We're going to use the 6H pencil, and the reason we're using it, of course, is because it's the darkest lead, which means it's going to give us the lightest line to start with. And I just want to point out that your view is of the top end, mine is of the side, so what I'm drawing is going to be different from what you're seeing. But you'll still be able to see my techniques and how I'm doing this so that you can draw your own. So let's begin. And my center of the page is right here. So this first eggshell, I'm going to draw off to the side here, and I'm drawing it as if the whole egg is there, just so I can get the right shape. It's just a rough, loose, freehand draw of the circle. And then I'm going to draw the other part of the egg, or the shell, over next to it, and I'm going to look at the arrangement. So it's sitting a little bit in front. So the front of this shell is going to be, if this is the bottom of this shell, the bottom of this one is not going to be across, it's going to be down a little bit. So I'm going to start this one about here and look at the distance. You have to use your math when you're getting it on the page. So I've got a little bit of a distance, about a ½ an inch here. So I'm going to create a distance for where I start my shell. So it's going to be, the bottom's going to be here, and the top is coming to about right here. So that's about here. Once I make that shape, so here's my top, there's my distance, and so now I'm going to make like a half circle, and this is just a freehand rough sketch. There's going to be a lot of sculpting in this shape before it's all over with. That's why you want to draw light, use your light pencil, so that you can play with this shape a little bit. Otherwise, the other option would be to use a grid. We're not going to do that in this study. We're just going to do it freehand to kind of get used to that a little bit. So I'm just going to get some of this extra stuff off of here before I start putting in some detail. Now, just a heads up, there will be some speed drawing in this so that you don't have to sit and watch me for hours and hours and hours. But you can always take a break and work on yours for a while and then come back and watch some more if you want to. But I have a pretty good initial shape on here, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop off part of what I've drawn here to create the inside of this shell. And I can already see that I don't have enough shape up here. From the angle that I have, I can see that it's curved upward more and I have it curved over more. So I'm going to fix that, and actually I can just add it to what I have and leave this other line on there because the break is allowing me to make that adjustment. So and you have to know, and I've said this in class, you need to look at your reference back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So my eyeballs, if you could see them, you would see that I look at this object every second, every 2 seconds. I'm just looking back and forth to make sure that I'm getting the right shape. And be sure when you're holding your pencil, you're using the side of the tip, not the very tip, because if you're using the very tip of your pencil, if you're holding your pencil like this, you're going to damage your paper. You need to hold your pencil so that you're using the side. So this is one way to hold it. Another way to hold it is to put it in between your index finger and your middle finger and brace it with your thumb. So these two fingers are bracing it, and this one is directing it. Your index finger is directing it. And so that's my preference to draw with. You can find what works best for you. So I am just going to work through this shape a little bit. It comes down, and then towards the bottom there's a break that comes up. It has a little bit of a curve. Oh, I just moved it. Let's move it back. There we go. Has a little bit of a curve right here, so I like to pay attention to all the detail. My goal for this eggshell is to make it look like what I'm viewing. That's the whole goal. So I'm going to take my time and sculpt out the shape of this shell. And I'd like for you to do the same. Just take your time and sculpt it out. See, I need a little more shell over here. So at this point, I think we'll just do a little speed up of the film and maybe put some nice music to it, and you can see the progression that way, okay? Okay, I've got a pretty good handle on the shape, and if I need to come back and make adjustments a little later, I will. You can constantly just keep making adjustments, and the more you practice doing these shapes, the better you'll get at the actual shape. So, and it's kind of fun to challenge yourself to try to get what you see on the page. And it might be frustrating at first, but just keep in mind that the more you do this, the stronger your eye becomes for actually seeing what's on the page. So don't give up and think you can't do it, because you will do it. It's just a matter of time. All right, now I'm going to move on to this next shape, and I think I've got it in a pretty good position. And from this angle, it's curving. And at the bottom, I've got a little dip. This one will be a lot easier to draw. Little dip, another little dip, and then it just comes around. And that's that shape. That was easy. All right, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to put the cast shadows on very lightly. I'm gonna do an outline which will be covered up because there's no lines in realism, and so, but we've got to get it on the page initially, and then we'll cover up our lines. So I see an oval coming around that kind of comes out into a rectangular shape. So I'm going to first put the oval on there, and it starts about right here on the page, okay, and it comes around about like so, and then from here it shoots out in this direction, and then there's another shadow that's coming out this way. So there's 3 shadows coming from that, and then from this egg, this part of the shell, the shadow's coming from in here and around. So we have our eggshells on the page. They are centered, and we're ready to begin shading. I'm going to continue using my 6H to begin shading, and using the side of my pencil, I'm just going to very carefully put some color on the page. And remember what I've told you, you want to make sure you do this in a way that you are not leaving any white spots. no paper showing. It's not scratchy, in other words. So you've got to put this color on the page. You can use different types of strokes, as we did with the sphere. If you remember the sphere exercise that we just did, this is so similar to that. And you just want to work slowly and move the pencil very lightly. My pressure is almost non-existent. I'm just allowing the paper to do the work. Okay, I'm just putting my pencil on the paper just enough that it will grab some graphite, but not hard enough that I'm doing any damage to the paper. In fact, if I were to try to erase this right now, I could erase the entire thing and you wouldn't see it. In fact, I'll show you. If I take my eraser through it, and I can fix this, it'll take it right through there. You see that? So there's no damage to that paper at all. So that's why you want to go lightly, because if you have to erase for some reason, and you will erase, you want to be able to not have damage on the paper. You want to be able to go back and fix it. Okay? So the shadow that I see, the darkest part of the shadow ends right here on the page, and so this is why I'm putting the darkest portion back here on this small shell. And I'm just going to keep laying it down until it looks like what I see on the egg. And a gradient is a spectrum of value. Okay, value is the color. So this value is dark to light, and that's the gradient. So you want to create a gradient effect on this. And the gradient actually comes all the way around, and it just leaves this little circle of light right here. So I'm going to color it in all the way down, and then bring the color around to this side. And remember, this is a first layer, very first layer. So it's going to be a similar color all the way across initially, because we're going to come back and darken it in. But at least we've got color, because it's truly, even though eggs are white, they're really not bright white. Okay, there are some gray colors in that shell. So there, we've got our first layer. Okay, I'm going to take my HB so that I can put some darkness in here. It's interesting the way the light is hitting this, because it's a little bit light here because there's a reflection off of this other shell. So I can barely see it, but it's lighter here than it is right here. So I'm going to, actually I think what I'll do is I'm going to dab a little bit of this out, and I can see where I've actually, now that I'm looking at this, I have a little bit of an error in my shape. It's my little dabber. It's good for taking off a little bit. That's about right. But my shape is actually off on the bottom. It curves around a little bit more. And I'm watching what I'm doing as I'm carving off part of this. And then the egg actually comes out here and curves in here, and then curves back around. And you see, I have to be careful because I just used my HB, not thinking about it, and the edge is kind of dark, so I'm going to tap off a little bit of that edge, pick up my 6H again, and come back and put that back on there and color it in very carefully. I'm going to continue using the side. And this is just the base, so you got to keep in mind, because you're probably looking at this going, oh, it doesn't look very good. Well, it's the start, okay? It's the start. So let's go back to the HB, you got to layer. We're going to be layering quite a bit every time you do a drawing. If you're using the techniques that I'm teaching you, it's going to be all about layering. So we're going to come back with this HB. We'll probably not go much darker than the HB in this exercise. Okay. Okay. And fade off a little bit. Okay. I am also going to take my dabber and come back and take a little more color off here. Take a little color off back here. Dab off that edge. Okay, so what I want to start doing is I want to start putting the bottom shadow on so that it starts looking 3D. That's what's going to give this the effect. So on the bottom of this with my HB, I'm going to put the shadow on the bottom here, and I'm not using much pressure. I'm just layering, and you see how dark it gets just from doing a little bit of layering. So I got to be very careful. I might even switch back to my 4H so it's not too dark. So right here I'm doing a feather stroke, and feather stroke is a stroke that actually leaves the page at the end. So you're laying it down and you're moving away from the page, and it lifts off just in time to leave just a little bit of graphite. And as you can tell, I've switched back to my 6H so that I don't make this too dark. You could do this whole project with just the 2H, or excuse me, the 6H or 2H. 2H should work as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put that cast shadow in so I can start getting some detail. Now, one of the things that I like to do when I'm rendering an object is I like to stop and take a break from my eyes and then come back and look at it. So that's what I'm going to do right now, and then come back and look for mistakes or additions that I failed to see and get started again. So we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we are getting close to finishing this project, and I just want to point out that I did switch to my darkest pencil to get some of this line on the bottom. When something is sitting on a tabletop or sitting on anything and the sun is shining on it, you're going to have your darkest point. So you want to make sure, whether it's an apple or whatever it is, that you've got this little point down at the bottom where it's nice and dark, and that is going to make it look realistic. Okay, so at the very end you can pull that out. If you want to do it sooner, you can. I did it a little bit sooner, but you can take this 6B or 9B or whatever color you have that's dark, your darker pencil, and just get that little bottom area, and that will make it pop off the page for you. Okay, we're going to speed this up, and I'm going to work some more on the shading, and then we'll finish up. Okay, now what I want to talk about is this little edge. There's little jagged pieces, and I'm going to come in closely with, I'm going to actually switch back. That was my 6B, by the way. I used that to get that nice dark look. And actually, before I do that, the detail work, which I'm going to do with the 4H, I'm going to take my scrubber and just push that graphite into the page a little bit. The scrubber is really nice. I have a link for a set of scrubbers that are smaller than this that I found on Amazon for 10 bucks. They get 3 scrubbers in a pack. And so let me know if you're interested, and I'll go ahead and just send that out to you anyway, so you'll have it, because I like the control that this gives you without making the page muddy like tutorial. And we will talk about tutorial, how do you say it? Tutorials, the little, whatever they're called, tutorials. Anyway, moving on. Yes, sometimes the words just don't come to me. They're little blenders, paper blenders. Okay, we will talk about those. We're not using those right now though, because quite frankly, I don't think that at this stage any of you would use them correctly, because they can be overused. So we will get to those, but I want you to first have really good control on your pencils and how to blend this out without using the paper blender. And when I'm off camera, I will practice that word, because honestly, I could say it yesterday. I don't know what the difference is today. Anyway, I'm going to speed this up while I go in and get the little detail. There's little cracks, little jagged edge along here, and I'm going to take this 6H and go in closely and try to put in some of that fine detail. Then after I put that detail in, I'm going to come back, and from this angle I see a white edge. And it's because of these lights that are in here, but it's kind of cool. So this is one of the reasons I took the 6B and began darkening this shell, is because I have had the idea later on to come in and see what it'll look like to put that white edge in there. Quite frankly, it may not work, and if it doesn't, I'll just cover it up. But there is a really clean little edge where it's like the inside of the shell. It's right on the inside tip without being here. It's right on the edge. So I'll give it my best to try to do that. But in the meantime, we'll speed this up, and I'll get that detail in, okay? Okay, so right now I'm working on putting that light in there, and I don't have a thin enough eraser. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry this light on down, and then I'm going to come back in with my pencil and make it thinner through filling in with the graphite. And it's going to be a little tricky, but I think I can make it work. So I'm going to take my 4H, and let's see if I can do this. Actually, I need to dab out the edge off of this just a little bit. I don't want to be working against myself, so if I have anything that stands out, I need to take that off. So I did. But I'm just going to bring this graphite color with my 4H in kind of tight right here. So this is a very thin line. And this may take a little while. You know, the thing about doing this type of exercise is you need to plan to work on it over a little bit of time so that you can actually take your time. You might just do a little tiny bit on it, put it down, and then come back and do some more later. Because if you do it that way, then what'll end up happening is you'll come back and you'll like it more. You'll see that it actually looks better than you thought it did. That always happens. I'm telling you, that always happens to me. When I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I really goofed this one up, and I put it down, and I say, well, before I do any erasing, I'm gonna come back and look later. And sure enough, 9 times out of 10, I really didn't see it for its value. And so it's always a good idea to put your work away for an hour or a day and then come back and look at it again, because it'll make sense then. And if it doesn't, then you're refreshed enough to go in and fix it. So either way, it's a good thing to take a break. And I'm just adding things that I see that I've missed along that edge. And the more you go in and look at it, the more things you'll find. And see, I'll come back in and make that little edge look thinner and thinner. See, it's starting to come out a little bit. It's still too thick, but the more I work it, the more I go in there and color around it, the smaller it'll get, and the closer I'll get to the goal that I'm trying to reach, and just making that little edge. And remember, you got to take the backside off so it doesn't look like there's a line, right? So just use this as some time to really start understanding your drawing. Okay. All right, we're getting close. All right, I'm going to leave that guy alone for a little bit. I'll come back to him, but I'm going to leave him alone for now. And then I'm going to come back over to this guy, and I'm going to take my 6B, and I'm getting brave. I'm going to put another little layer in here. I'll use my scrubber because this watercolor paper is just too grainy. If you find that you're using paper that's too grainy, you're going to want to use your scrubber. And eventually, when I introduce you to the tortillon, there's that word, tortillon. It would come back to me eventually. You'll use it ever so sparingly because it can really get out of hand. It makes it, if you use the tortillon too much, it just really makes mud. So you just have to be extremely careful with it and have a good understanding of what it's actually doing. I've had some good results with the tortillon, and I've had some really lousy results, so that's why I'm being cautious with introducing them to you. Just want to make sure that you don't mess up your paper after your drawing, after working on it, you know, especially if you've spent hours. Okay, the other thing we're going to do with this is I'm going to actually put some value in the back. I think it needs it. We're not going to do that yet, but we will. I'm just going to work on this a little bit more. Okay, I'll speed it up so I can get through this part, not bore you too much. I think that's good. And now over here, I'm just going to dab out a little bit of the shell. There's a reflection on the inside of this that I can see that it's lighter right in there. Okay, and I'm just going to do a little experiment. I'm going to take my kneaded eraser and make a point and see if I can lighten up this little area. Okay, I think we're ready to put a little background in, and then we're going to be finished with this. Okay, so I went ahead and put some background in here so you didn't have to watch me do it on the left-hand side, so that the eggshell showing up, that's a nice value that gives definition to the shell itself. So if you get some background in there, then it will really make your object pop. So gotta get the right pencil. I just picked up the 6B and it made it a little dark right there, so I'm gonna pop that out of there. Okay. I'm gonna continue working on this shell just a little bit. I've got some things over here going on, but I discovered something really cool I want to show you. If you take your 0-point eraser and you take this sandpaper tool, this is for the tortilla, for the blender, but you can use it for the erasers, or you can use it for sharpening your pencil lead. I'm going to use it for sharpening my eraser, and it's allowed me to get into that little area that I was failing to get into earlier. So you just take it and ever so gently sand some of that eraser off. Look at that nice point. And now I can go in to these really fine areas and brighten that up so that it's even wider. And I brought it in for this area as well. It's from this angle that I'm looking at it, I can see the top of it. So I went ahead and put an edge on that one, and what I had to do is I had to take my 6H, make sure I grab 6H and not B, and then darken the inside of it so that this part will stand out. And you see, I just used the very tip. So you're hearing something in the background? That's my kitty cat trying to get something. Working from home, you know, there's going to be different sounds. Anyway, see if we can get through this without too much noise in the background. This is such a handy eraser because if it goes dark on you, you could just dab off some of that. See, that works nicely. Same here, this is a little bit dark, but we're really just about finished. And the way that I got this background in over here was with my 6H. Using the side of my 6H, I just very slowly, that's why I did it off camera, so you wouldn't have to be bored with watching me color in the background, but I just colored in the whole background using different tight strokes, going very slowly. And then when I got enough of this on there, and I want to show you how I did it, so I didn't put all of it on there that I wanted. You see, it kind of looks rough, and it's this paper, you know, it's watercolor paper. Sometimes you just have to adjust to what your tools are. So you see it's kind of scratchy, but then when you come back in with this nice brush, watch what happens. Just blends it right into the paper. Taking that scratchy appearance off, yet it's not muddy, so it works nicely. And I'm going to go ahead and speed up the rest of this video for you and come back at the end so that I can finish this off and not take up too much more time.
First I didn't have the will to carry on. Illusions in my mind. Like that picture when you feel you can't go on. Like you've been left behind. Life goes on now. Take me to that funky place where you were never born. Carry on now. Psychedelic tendencies of love, will bring it on, bring it on, bring it on, bring it on. Don't wait until tomorrow. Bring it on, bring it on, bring it on. Give me something for the dream that I am in. You know I love the way you save me. A broken pawn I depended on was only life I was feeling. It goes on now. Take me to that funky place where you and I were born. Carry on now. Ain't no reason you should feel for sure. Unconditional love will bring it on. Bring it on, bring it on. Don't wait until tomorrow. Wait until tomorrow. Bring it on.
Okay, we are really just about done, and just in time. There's Mr. Sylvester. You gotta see this pretty little face. Say hi to everybody. Yeah. Sweetheart. So I guess that means we're finished. And what a nice way to end this little movie. Thanks, Sylvester, and thank you for tuning into this. And be sure to email me your pictures so that I can critique and tell you how wonderful they are. And we'll see you in the next one.
Is your kingdom come? Chase it